Okay, welcome to Detroit in Black and White. It's Friday night and it's the start of a new year. So it's going to be an interesting year here. Let's first introduce our other person. The other two people are missing, Vanessa and Moss and Adolph Mongo, but we do have Jim Nardone, the former police chief of Trenton. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening. Thank you. Hopefully, Adolph will be joining us shortly. If not, then we'll count on our friends out here in the crowd that can help us get through this show. Thank you.
You've spoiled some of our viewers because some of our viewers this morning on our other show, the week that was, one person said, "Hey, how come you're not reading our comments?" And I said, "Well, we do that on the other show. I mean, we occasionally do, but." We do display the comments here. We do read them, which is great. Yeah, whatever.
There's Derek, like clockwork. Derek Henry, 7031. Thank you, Derek. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No.
Yeah. So anyways, is there anything that doesn't have to be the outrage of the week? Anything you want to bring up? Or
there is something that I want to bring up. I think it's interesting, and I think you're probably the guy that can give us some insight. I can't give insight because I'm not familiar with this person. And I'm just going to ask you to maybe comment about it, talk about it a little bit from your perspective. There was an article in the Detroit News on the joint operating agreement, how they're splitting the Free Press. I won't call it the Free Press and the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press after about 40 years now, almost 39 years. 1986, I guess, was the joint operating agreement.
I think it became official. It was first announced in 86. Became official in 89 because it went through a lot of court challenges. It actually went to the Supreme Court, which tied 4-4. Right. One of the Supreme Court guys, Wizard White, I guess, who can't remember if he played White Lion player or whatever, and he recused himself because of whatever conflicts he may have had. So it was 4-4. So the lower court ruling stood that the JOA could go through. I had gotten to the news in September of '84, and it was owned by the Evening News Association, which was great. They were really gung ho about journalism. They really had high standards for journalism, and then Gannett, which was sort of not a beloved. Gannett, the biggest newspaper chain in the country, was not beloved. It was seen as kind of very sterile, very uniform, and they announced that they were going to buy the Detroit News, and we were all bummed out about it. We were like, Gannett's going to ruin it. And Gannett was also the creator in 1982 of USA Today, which was another thing that a lot of journalists didn't like. They had shortened their articles to very short. They were very colorful, and for the newspaper, serious newspaper people, we liked black and white, newsprint, and we didn't like short stories because when I was first there, we would hand in a story. If you hand in a story 20 inches, which would be like 20 paragraphs, 25 paragraphs, no big deal. By the time Gannett really put its imprint on there, we were a lot of times writing stories between 6 paragraphs and 12 paragraphs. Not all. Some were big blowouts on Sunday, but so we didn't like Gannett.
So you were in transition. You got there just before the transition.
2 years before, and then, or maybe a year and a half, and then they announced it, and a lot of reporters were very, very unhappy with that, and they took over, and what Gannett had was a lot of small newspapers or medium sized. They owned the Lansing State Journal. They owned some smaller papers, and so my saying was always, Gannett is the master of mediocrity. They'll take bad papers, turn them into mediocre. They'll turn big papers, turn them into mediocre, and we quite a push back because there were a group. They started getting the bigger papers because I don't know if it was ego or what, but they bought us. They bought the Des Moines Register, the Louisville Courier, which were all top brand name papers, and so There was pushback. There was definitely tension and pushback, and they were very anti-union. They tried to bust the union in '95, and so. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, you're good. I was just gonna first let me say hi to Currency Winston, Janet Overall. Happy New Year, Candace McCrae. Good to see you tonight, Janet Seluk from downriver. Hello to you, Jill Sheridan from way down south. Happy New Year. She enjoyed the week that was this morning, so you did get some positive feedback there. Eric Brown, our colleague. Good evening to you, Eric. Dewayla Boyce. Good evening. Happy New Year to Mary Kemet. And we talked about Derek. Derek is always like on top of things. So, anyways, hope I didn't miss anybody. Carol Lee Hutton. Are you familiar with Carol Lee Hutton?
Yes.
You know Carol Lee Hutton?
Yeah. I worked with her. I went to college with her, but I worked with her at the Detroit News, and she kind of lost out in a little power struggle there. She wanted to move up the chain, but she went to the Free Press and eventually became the editor at the Free Press.
Right. So she left. She went to the Free Press. She ended up at the Hey True Sensation. How are you this evening? Anyway, she commented. There was a story in the Detroit News. I guess she was a former Detroit News editor, former publisher, and editor of the Detroit Free Press.
Right.
And she had some very interesting comments, some good comments. As she said, both newspapers won Pulitzers during the partnership. And both newspapers changed the lives in the community, citing the Kwame Kilpatrick coverage. But here's where it gets a little funny for me. I want your and our friends' reaction to it. I want to tell the truth here, but she said, even though there's a whole political entity out there that likes to trash it and say that it's harmful and anti-American, it's quite the opposite.
Talking about the media or
talking about people trashing the media.
Okay.
Even though there's a whole political entity out there that likes to trash it and say journalism is harmful and American, it's quite the opposite. So my question is, so during this conversation of the joint operating agreement, Ms. Hutton thought it was important. And the question is she spreading bias, and is she spreading hate to disagree? Is she spreading hate and disagreeing with people that just disagree with her? And that's really not the role of the media. So I kind of cherry picked a little bit, but it seemed as if she was getting political in this conversation. And I struggle with that. I think
she's not with the paper anymore.
Right. Exactly. She was just making she's retired from both, but her comments were that, there's a whole political entity out there that's, thinks that the press is un-American. So I want to know, what political entity is she talking about specifically? And if it's who I think it is, I mean, is it 20%, 30%, 50%? And why did she feel that it was necessary when she's talking about good things to say that? It just seems like it's a divisive comment to me.
Well, I think there's been a lot. I mean, we have a president who never misses an opportunity, who ironically complains about fake news and all that, and whose stuff is so contrary to the truth at times. But I think I think she feels strongly about it, as I do as well. I mean, I think, look, the media is not perfect. The media should be. We used to have a lot more media critics. In fact, the New York Times and the Washington Post had an ombudsman who basically readers could go to and say, I think this is screwed. I think this is, this is slanted or whatever. And the ombudsman would really be a reader advocate. And we had one guy, we had several at the Washington Post. One guy was Mike Getler, who had been a former foreign editor. And he was a kick-ass, he was kick-ass as an ombudsman, and he did kick the ass of some reporters when readers might complain, and he'd write a public column about it. But he also, what he did was he put out a newsletter internally every Friday, and he critiqued the paper. And he didn't hold back at all. When he saw something that he thought was biased or unfair, he slammed the reporter in these newsletters. And I remember once I told my editor, I said, should we do something on that? And he goes, oh no, we don't want to end up in the newsletter on Friday. So, but all those have gone away. I don't know, for budgetary stuff or partly the papers don't have the same backbone and integrity. They don't want to be criticized internally like that. So, but what's happening. I mean, to be totally dismissive. Oh, it's in the New York Times. Forget about it. I'll say that to somebody. They'll say, well, where did you read that? And I'll say, well, the New York Times. I go, oh yeah, the New York Times. Like, we can believe them. I'm not saying hasn't been any bias coverage at all. I have a lot of friends still at the New York Times. I have some friends, more and more people have taken buyouts at the Washington Post. And I can say that they're people of integrity who care about the truth, who I know are very careful and calibrated in the way they report. So I think sometimes reporters get defensive. Here, I'll tell you, can I play this little, this is just funny, just the administration, just how they throw out facts or as what are alleged facts. I just have this little thing.
Today, Donald Trump announced a major deal to drastically cut the price of Ozempic and other weight loss drugs. It's all part of his campaign promise and his one consistent principle of no fatties.
President, our estimate, based on the company numbers as well, is Americans will lose 135 billion pounds by the midterms.
Whoa! 135 billion pounds by the midterms. Why the midterms? Did they add a swimsuit competition to those? Look, I'm no mathematician, but 135 billion pounds divided by 340 million Americans means we each have to lose 400 pounds by the midterms.
I mean, I just think it's so fun, like the numbers that get thrown out there, and nobody questions it, and so who does question it is people like that. But the media, the media misses those kinds of things. Here's a guy who figures out what let's do the math on that.
Math doesn't match. Couple comments, Allan, and then I'm going to ask you another question. Major newspapers and print media are suffering, even the great New York Times that you just spoke of. So I can see the struggle that the Free Press and the News has had as a joint venture. Everyone is struggling to survive. And it seems like survival is more the objective than to thrive in a lot of instances. Angela Beatty. Hello, Angela. Cuz. We'll call her Cuz because that's who Vanessa calls her, Cuz, because I think they're Cuz. Corporate media is controlled, and they have to present the narrative that powers in control tell them to present, and that is why independent media is trouncing major corporate mass media. That's a big statement, trouncing. Yeah, maybe. And Tamika Rainey, hello to you, Tamika. Good to see you. What I thought was interesting is the comments by Nolan Finley, who a lot of people can take him or leave him. Sometimes he's pretty stubborn and whatever you want to call him.
He's my editor when I was in the Lansing Bureau of the Detroit News. Yeah.
I know a lot of the people that I know down here, business owners in this area. We're very friendly with Nolan Finley. I never met him, don't know anything about him, but I'm talking about more right kind of people. But he did mention that the advantage, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I missed something or if somebody else read the article, is that the advantage was that we had completely separate editorial boards, and that's what helped both papers survive. And my position there is, Mr. 1213, good Happy New Year to you, is that I don't really care about the editorial page. I understand what it's there for, but I'm more focused on the front page and what the news may be on the front page.
I think I might. I didn't read that particular comment, but I think when we talk about in the news business, when we say we have separate editorials, they're talking not so much of the editorial page, but the newsroom itself. Because I agree with you. I mean, I think more and more of the editorial pages are less and less relevant for some. There's just too many voices out there now. There's too many opinions through social media and stuff like that. I don't think people are as reliant on, and plus, I mean, you see like David Marinus, who's an amazing writer. And I think he's finally cut his ties with the Washington Post just because of Jeff Bezos meddling and stuff like that. But there was some editorial, which is unusual. I could see someone writing a column on this, but they had an editorial going something like, California is going to miss its billionaires. Well, guess who lives in California? Jeff Bezos.
A lot of billionaires.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of meddling going on there, but which makes the editorial page at the Post even less credible.
But I think that's important. I'm sorry. I think that's important that you let our viewers and the people know the difference between what I said and what the reality is. So you're really talking about the direction of the news.
They're talking about the news. When he says the editorial, it's different. He's referencing really the news department, not the editorial page itself, because they did have the arrangement with the JOA after in '89. It was finalized. Was that the business sides consolidated, so they didn't need 2 circulation departments. They didn't need 2 printing plants. They didn't need 2 advertising staffs. They consolidated all the business side, but the newsrooms remained totally separate. There was no joining at all, except for the fact that, and I lost track because I stopped buying the Sunday paper because I get the papers online. They did have consolidation. Like when I was there, the Free Press had, right when they started the JOA, and for a while, the Free Press had the Saturday paper. We had the Sunday paper.
I remember
We had the front page, and I think the Free Press might have had one section inserted into it. But the editorial, there was still competition. But when I was there, when I first got there, and even with the JOA, there was intense competition between both newsrooms. But even before that, it was very, very intense. And, the Free Press would get their first edition would come out at 9:30. We would get a copy of the paper in the newsroom, and the night editor would call you if we got beat on a story. And he'd go, a guy, Jim Titsworth, believe it or not, he'd call and say, hey, the Free Press got this story. Can we match it for the next edition? And you'd have to be scrambling 10 o'clock at night, debating whether you'd call sources and stuff that late at night, and you try to match the story. So it was extremely competitive. And if we found out, I was working on a story once on this big dope dealer in Detroit, and I found out that the Free Press was working on it, and we made sure we rushed it in and we got it in before my competitor. And so it was very, very competitive. It's still competitive, but you don't feel I was talking this morning about it. I feel like the Detroit News is more aggressive in its reporting, has a sense of urgency. And I think the Free Press seems a little bit more laid back, and it's a little too laid back, to be honest. And at some points, they're still very talented people on both staffs, but the staffs are so small now. It's like they, used to have 3-4 reporters at City Hall. They have 1. I don't even think the Free Press has a full-time police reporter. We used
George Hunter's over at the News.
Yeah,
George Hunter?
We used to have somebody at the day cop reporter, and then we had David Grant, who was really a super character. He'd come at 4 o'clock. He put on a smoking jacket, light up a cigarette, put his feet on the desk, and usually there was a young intern, and he put his feet on the desk, smoked a cigarette, and he'd say, all whiteys go home. And he would take over, and he had bottles of liquor in his locker there. So when cops were filling out their police reports, they would come down and Dave would pour them a little liquor and share the reports with him. And so
that's awesome. Stephanie Jackson, good evening to you. Good to see you. We have a couple of questions, couple of talk points on Tamari and G Money Hollywood. Should we take a break first and then come back to, if there's something you want to know about the Detroit newspaper business, tonight's the night, and we have the guy that can help you with that. So we'll take a break and we'll go from there. If that's okay with you.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. Are you living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, or maybe you know someone who's in the same situation? The probate process may be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. We have several nonprofit partners who have free attorneys who can assist you. Contact our office, 313-224-5990, or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. Don't lose your family property. Some of these properties have been in the family for 4 or 5 generations. Contact us now. We're here to help.
Okay, welcome back. It's a Friday night here in Detroit in black and white. We're a little light on the crew here, but we've got Jim Nardone, former police chief. Adolph Mongo is not here. Hopefully he'll be around tomorrow, and I know Vanessa will be around tomorrow as well. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was going to, there's some questions out there. I want to read them to you. And then I have a question for you too, if I could add, and you can maybe try and keep track. I'm sure you can do that. Unbiased investigative reporting is what will bring back the newspaper and mainstream news, is Tamari Kemet. G-Money Hollywood, the new national media doesn't have the charisma of a Cronkite, Donaldson, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, and Dan. Rather, the current faces of the mass media just don't earn the nation's trust. So there's a question on trust. The other one's about unbiased investigative reporting from Tamari. Janet Selleck says, in the U.S. and Europe, newspapers are facing declining advertising sales. Kind of where I was going to, my question, the loss of much classified advertising and precipitous drops in circulation, not to mention the reliance on digital forums. Keep in mind that people used to pay to have, obituaries and death notices and all these things that create, I don't know what kind of money they created, but they were income. So, that's not even something you talk about advertising and you talk about those kind of things. News journalism equals fewer coverage, Janet. The Detroit News was excellent. Fewer journalists. Did the two news companies used to spy out each other for stories to steal and come out of the story first? Mr. 1213, I think you were kind of commenting on that. But my question to you, Allan, and I want you to go into some depth if you would, is where do we go from here with these two newspapers?
Well, before we get to that, it's a good question. But before we get to it, I just want to explain a little bit of the advertising. The dilemma, the problem is that when you go on a lot of these websites now, Google has their own ads, and they're cheaper, and they're so robust. I mean, they've taken a huge chunk out of the advertising market for independent organizations, and also Facebook as well. People are advertising on Facebook. It used to be you wanted advertising, you went to your local newspaper, whether it was a big paper, a weekly paper, or the daily paper. Used to see full page Hudson's ads, which were every day. It was like
car dealerships, the whole
car dealerships, $10,000 ads. And then when the JOA came, they reduce the prices to try to knock each other out of business. Sometimes they try to sell at a loss, like $3,000 a page. But so we see a lot of loss of revenue. And then, like you say, classified, we have, Craigslist and all these other, Facebook marketplace. So there's a lot of alternatives, and it's a tough business to be in. So where do we go from here? I mean, I hope, my only hope is that the Detroit News also owns the company that owns the media group, owns Macomb Daily, and they also own the Oakland Press, which are not particularly great papers these days. They have some good reporters there, but not many. And I mean, there's not many reporters there anymore. And so you're hoping that they can act as a JOA of sorts, where they have the same advertising people, the same circulation people and stuff like that, save money. And that also, when you have a group, that you can sell group ads. You can say, okay, look, so-and-so Chevrolet, I can give you a price for this, but I'm going to get you in the Detroit News, the Macomb Daily, and the Oakland Press for this one price. And the same thing with Gannett, which owns the Detroit Free Press. There are the Livingston Daily or something out in Brighton, maybe. They own some in the state as well, and they can do that. But I mean, the idea, I think, I don't know, we still haven't gotten the story who wanted to end the JOA, because it didn't have to end. And my guess is that one side thought they could knock out the other. because nobody wants these papers. They don't like competition.
Well, that's a great point. I'm sorry. Tamari talks about the Detroit News was excellent in breaking the Detroit homeowners overtax $600 million.
Great story. Important.
While we're talking about competition, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Mr. 1213 was talking about spying. You talked a little bit about competition in the newsroom and in advertising. It just seems like there was, like you said, there's so much. The movie theaters probably were advertising back then, right?
Yeah, they had listed everybody. You had tire companies, Belt Tire. You had car dealerships. You had department stores, Hudson's, and all that.
Appliance stores, Fred,
ABC, ABC Warehouse, Highland Appliance, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just, there was a lot out there, and there was a lot of revenue, and the advertising people who. Some of them have not really made a great adjustment to the digital era. They were used to, back in the day, you get a 12-month contract with such and such a dealership or whatever, and you just occasionally have lunch with that person. But here it's you have to be a lot more creative in terms of doing packages and say, we've got a podcast, and we've got a YouTube station we can get you on, and we've got our digital, ads here. And then we also have the hard copy. Now, the Detroit News says they are going to start publishing an independent Sunday newspaper, which is interesting because I don't know the last time that you bought a Sunday paper, but for me, it's been a long time. Like I say, I subscribe digitally. I read, online, but I haven't gotten. It's nice not to have those papers laying around all the time.
Sure, and trying to find somewhere to put them, right?
Yeah. But it's fun also to be able to, I think you miss stories when you're online, because sometimes I will occasionally get a newspaper and I'll be like, holy shit, I never saw this story online. It's just easier. You see every story there, where online, someone might write a column, like M.L. Elric might write a column, and it might not even be on the front page of the thing. And that was the thing that really bothered advertisers in the very beginning of the internet, was that unless, a lot of their advertisement, there's only so many ads you can put on the home page. So a lot of the advertisement ended up on the landing page, as they say, at the article page, where you click an article and there's their ad. And they would be like, wait a minute, where's our ads? We want to see it. They wanted to see it on the front page. And so it's taken a while for companies to adjust to that. And like I say, the competition, a lot of companies say, forget it. I can do Google ads for much cheaper.
And G Money said 15 years since he bought any printed newspaper. He also talks, and I'm going to ask you this question, right? Sometimes things transition, what was conservative or liberal or different. So G Money talks, they always like the free press over the news. So I always looked at it this way. I delivered the free press, and I think you did too, and Adolph too. And it seemed like the news came out late in the afternoon. It was more the buttoned up edition of the news. The free press at that time, I'm talking about, early 70s, whatever, middle 70s. It seemed like the free press was the more aggressive seeker of breaking news at that time. Is that wrong?
By the time I got there in 84, I felt like the news was still a little bit more aggressive, but the free press was very aggressive too. I mean, it was truly a newspaper war. It was great. It was a lot of fun, beating the competition. You wake up in the morning and you've got the story and they don't. I remember once I did get a call. I was covering the trial of Chief Hart, and there was a big revelation that came. But you sit there for 8 hours. And you're trying to stay awake and trying to focus and not daydream. And one of the witnesses got up there and said something that I thought was, wow, very implicated the chief. And I thought, wow, this is a major story. I went back, wrote the story, front page of the Detroit News that night. And I was competing against a guy who was really one of their top crime reporter, who was great. And he missed the story, only because he was probably daydreaming. So our story was, splashed across the front page, so-and-so says this. And his story was just a very mundane, routine thing buried inside the paper. So I get a call from the Night City editor, and he goes, hey, he goes, "Were you and Swickard in the same courtroom?" And my heart sunk because I thought, "Oh no, I fucked up. I missed something." And I said, "What's going on?" And he reads me Swickard's story, and he reads my story, and I'm like, "Hey, sorry, that's the story." I said, "I'm sticking with that," and I was right. But that's how competitive it was. Every night, if you got beat, you got called by the editor, and they weren't happy about it. And if you had a chance, you get on the phone and start calling people. And I did call people. Some people were pissed. I called people.
You were a big shot at the watering hole that night, right?
Yeah. So, but so it was very, very competitive, and so.
So Eric delivered the news, the Detroit News. Both newspaper companies probably saved millions by not having to use paper for printing, but put everything online. Mr. 1213, Karen C. Winston, I always preferred the free press, and I want you to touch on this. Tamari Kemet said the first thing Hitler did in the run-up to his takeover of Germany was attack the newspapers. Trump is following the same Hitler roadmap. I want you to touch a little bit about Radio Free Europe and some of the ways that the people behind the Iron Curtain and some of these other countries that had dictators were getting their information from the West, maybe whenever it was, 80 years ago? 90 years?
Well, I mean, Radio Free Europe is, I can't remember, Voice of America, I think.
Voice of America, right?
And they've tried to dismantle it, and then judges have ruled that they can't. I mean, for then, there was no internet. Now it seems some of these countries, countries like Iran, I think, try to block the internet, and China tries to regulate the internet and stuff like that. But I think still there's ways for news to come through now through all different phases. Back then, Radio Free Europe was trying to broadcast all around the world so people could hear what the U.S. perceived as the truth. And, look, countries that's one of the first things that dictators do is take over the media.
North Korea is a great example.
Yeah, they don't want, a good friend, Danny Fenster, who was, if any of you remember,
yes, tell the story,
Detroit, and he was writing in Myanmar for a paper, and they detained him at the airport. They were detaining a lot of journalists. He was in prison for, I believe, 6 months in a Myanmar prison, and thankfully for the administration and pulling out, talking to different countries and stuff, they were able to finally, Bill Richardson came and picked them up, right, and finally got him out of there. But one of the things that I did not like was that he wrote the military in Myanmar, which is formerly Burma, they own a lot of businesses. They get a lot of wealth from the country and they owned a brewery, a beer brewery. And Danny wrote a very critical column about that, about the military, how they were running it and all this stuff. And so they were pissed. The head military guy was really pissed at him. And so when you have a dictatorship, it worries me frankly, Jimmy Kimmel's not what we call the media, but he's part of the entertainment / media. When they were trying to, the FCC is trying to pull him off for a comment that I thought was rather benign about, Charlie Kirk.
Actually, it was factual.
Yeah, it was not anything nothing half as outrageous as some of the stuff that Trump says.
Well, some of the information was factual. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so, for the president to meddle and try to pressure ABC, and ABC was going, they removed him. And then there was so much pressure to put him back on, including I had Hulu, which is owned by ABC / Disney. And I called and I canceled. I said, please let them know I'm canceling because of Jimmy Kimmel. And I think their cancellation rate was so high that they brought Jimmy Kimmel back. But it's, the foundation, look, our Constitution was written, the First Amendment, with the idea that the media would play a very important role in democracy, free press and all that stuff. And I know you've mentioned the Biden administration did try to meddle with Facebook and telling them they shouldn't be running or allowing people to say things critical of the virus, the coronavirus shots and stuff like that, which look, freedom, it's good to have freedom. There's a balance between Do you let anyone say anything? Do you let people say racist stuff? Do you let them? Where's the line that you draw for what's freedom of speech and what's really not acceptable? When we were, I mean, the internet has changed everything so much. When we were at the newspaper, I'd interview 20 people for a story. I would decide while I'm writing who to put in the story, who to quote. The editorial letters to the editor, people would send those. People would sift through those, decide who would have a voice, really. And the same thing with TV reporters. They go out there, they interview 15 people, they edit it down to 4. But now the internet is anything. Anybody, you can self-publish in a second on X, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram. It's a whole unregulated thing. And sometimes you see some pretty harsh, ugly things that are written on the internet. And so, I used to have, with Deadline Detroit, I finally cut out the comment. You still can comment on Facebook and on X, but we used to have people anonymously commenting, and people would get into it with each other, and then some people would say really racist things and anti-Semitic things, and so we changed it to Facebook. But then we had a lot of bots doing advertisements that we couldn't. We kept doing all these things to try to block them, and I finally couldn't. I was spending too much time blocking and stuff like that. But it's great. I mean, the internet, in some ways, it's fantastic that we get to read all these voices. Now we have Substack. We have 1 million people doing Substack. We have podcasts like this where we express our opinions, and viewers get to express their opinions. So it's the Wild West, really.
So I'm going to ask you another question. First, Tamari talked about Detroit Public Schools had their own radio station, 90.9 FM WDTR, and it was stolen by Adami. Is that it?
David Adami, who was the president.
Okay. Yeah. I want to ask you a question about WDET. We had a representative. I think it was the vice president. Was it the vice president from WDET?
Oh, she was a general manager.
General manager of WDET. Yeah. And what's the direction of a station like WDET? Will they survive the new world as we see it? We probably should take a break and
yeah. All right, let's do that, and we'll come right back. Friday night here.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
What's the future of WDT? For some, obviously there's been some funding cut from that, and clearly it's a politically motivated. I got to tell you, maybe because I think I'm liberal or whatever, but I think some of the stuff on DET is so educational. I learned so much about issues that I don't know anything about, and in particular on the national level, when they're interviewing people on certain, whether it's on inflation or tariffs or whatever. I think they do a great job, and I don't see the bias there. I know people always find bias and say they're too liberal, or really about different wars. Some people may say, public radio is biased against Israel or whatever. I think public radio, but I think readership, people have stepped up. I think they're going to survive. I think, I listen to public radio probably every morning or almost every morning. And like I say, they do some interviews on issues, whether it's on farming, and I think they do a great job. I think they really are a great public service. So,
and they have good music, like programs. If you want to hear music that you're not going to hear on a mainstream station,
right. Absolutely,
you can hear that.
In fact, on Friday nights, right? I think right now they have Don Was from the.
Don Was. Don't tell everybody, but yeah, he
went to my high school. Him and David Weiss, who they're his name Don Was is really Don Fagenson. And he's become, and Don Was has become a record producer for Bonnie Raitt and I think Dylan and
Paul McCartney.
Yeah, just I mean he became very big time, and he does a radio show with on Friday nights on WDT where they talk, and he has a lot of knowledge about the industry. So
yeah, I think he and his band are starting a tour this week coming up. They're going to be all over the country somewhere. So if you like their music, it's more like a big band kind of a deal.
Yeah,
I'll read a couple of points. I'm going to try if I could. Our radio shows were looted on 90.9, and we weren't even allowed to get copies of the shows. African Worldview, Tamari's show. The mass media has not been inclusive enough. People of color should have been more of a main face and voice as soon as we hit the year 2000, which would have represented the nation, what the nation was looking for. Thank you, G Money. I agree with you. We need more diverse voices out there. We need to talk to people. We instituted African-centered education in Detroit Public Schools and used our radio station for teacher training and community awareness. Tamari Kemet. Thank you, Tamari. I was unaware of that. Thank you for your input.
I'll say, look, we need more, minorities and a bigger diversity. I called Wayne State, I don't know, maybe a year ago and said, look, I'd be interested in helping any way to recruit and develop more, minority reporters. To his credit, ML Elric has a program called Eye on Michigan, and I've helped him out here and there on it. It's primarily been aimed at it's investigative reporting for college students, and he's run it out of Michigan State University. But there is a high school program, which I attended over at the Wayne Community College. They had a day where they had all these high school kids coming, trying to get them interested in doing investigative reporting. So there is an effort, but we have to, it's like the farm club. You've got to start churning out and when I was
talking about sharing information to the community, right? And that's my biggest challenge.
But there's, a lot of the kids, we go around in different groups. There's like, I can't remember, there are probably certainly over 100 kids. So we would break up and talk to different groups. And some of the kids, they just really aren't interested. They came to the program, and there are some who are interested. And I try to tell them, I say, what a great opportunity for you. I said, look, you get to stand up for abuse. When you see authority being abused, you get to stand up to those people. You get to stand up to the most important people as a reporter and call them out and challenge them and hold them accountable. I said, this is an amazing opportunity, to help in the community, to help report, to inform, but also, so I try to really sell it that, hey, this is, to me, it's amazing that I could, working at Detroit News, you could deal with anybody. You go up against the governor, you go up against any of the legislators, you go up against the mayor, you get to challenge them if they're doing something wrong. Then you're at the Washington Post, and even more so, you go up against the White House and stuff like that. And it's only as, because you have the right to do that. And I think it's such a great opportunity to do that. And so I try to convince some of these kids, and look, the pay isn't great starting out in journalism, with exceptions here and there. I mean, you really have to love journalism. My first job, I was making $10,000 a year, but I was ecstatic.
You were making a difference. You feel like you're making a difference, right?
I was ecstatic having that I was actually getting paid to do something that I loved so much. And, eventually you get paid more, but it's not a get rich kind of thing. And some, have turned to the media now, TV, but now even you can see the TV is cutting back, and you see like less and less experienced people even on our local stations. I mean, they still have some, but some of them are not that experienced, and they're not getting paid a lot of money. So,
and Tamari talks about using a radio station for teacher training and community awareness. That's that's what the media should be doing, right? If she were allowed to continue her program, she would have Dr. Gloria House and to talk about the reparations task force recommendations. Well, this is important information that needs to be out in the community. And when you don't allow these mediums to get this information out, it hurts all of us, right? Jill Sheridan says, keep encouraging them, Allan.
Well,
Wayne State University, according to Eric, has a program called the Journalism Institute for Media Diversity. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, well, somebody says, well, they don't want to work for $40,000 a year. It's like, look, you know what? Are you gonna do something that you love? Or you're gonna do something just to make money that you're gonna hate? You wanna, if you're just going into something simply because this for the money, I think you're gonna have a harder time, going through a career. But I mean, people who have done journalism. I mean, I've been with people at all different levels who love journalism, who have just, and so the money was secondary to what. I mean, once you get to a bigger paper, there's better money there. But I think the Detroit News and the Free Press, some of the people are making just the regular reporters are probably making 90, 100,000 and some more. And some of the editors are certainly making more. But if that's, I mean, look, it's a service to your community. It's a public service. It's like, to be honest, I don't know if I ever told you a story. When I was in the 11th grade at Oak Park High, one of my teachers, Ron Willis, he was from New York. I told him, he was teaching, and I think he got a draft deferment because of it. And he said, I said one day, I said, I'm thinking of being a cop. And he said, no, Allan, don't be a cop. He says, who's a cop in my high school in New York? He goes, the greasers. And for those who don't know, the greasers, those are the guys who had the hair combed back and the leather coat, black leather coats and the pointy boots and all that. But I wanted to, I cared about justice, and I saw police as one form of that, which is great. And then, but journalism is also, it's in some ways being a cop without a gun, and being able to challenge people. And really, I've written stories where people, I did a story at the Detroit News where a banker got convicted. The U.S. Attorney's Office took all our story and charged the guy with basically corruption and stuff, and he got convicted. So we've been able to expose people in high places. I think it's an honor. You can't be abusive. It's like an officer. You've got a gun and a badge that gives you a lot of power, and you have to use some discretion in how you use that. Is that fair?
That's a fair statement. Morel Peter says DTE is raising rates, and he doesn't sound happy about it. That's what I take from it. Provides training in resume building, interview skills, and participation in major media conventions like NABJ and NAHJ. Sorry, Eric, I'm trying to read it. These tired eyes. Tamari Kemet, I commend your integrity, Allan. Thank you, Tamari. Channel 7 is a revolving door. It used to be a standard of what true journalism was about, and back in the day when Bill Bonds and Diana Lewis were the sublime model in the entire country. It's awful now. That's G Money Hollywood. Will the media regain their spot on one floor in the Coleman Young Municipal Center? That's something you've talked about, Allan. And I just want to say this because G Money's talking about Channel 7. Probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I played golf with a group from WDIV. And one of the people was a reporter that's not a reporter anymore. He had a little problem over there. Probably know who that is. I'm not going to mention his name. He has, and one of the guys was an editor. I got to know a couple of those guys, some of those guys pretty well. But they said, Jim, it's not 100,000 viewers for the news like it used to be, or 150,000 viewers. It's 5 or 10,000. So, I mean,
you're talking about for
TV.
Oh,
so my point is everything's kind of changed.
I'd say Ross Jones. Ross Jones is a friend of mine. I think Ross is still doing some investigative reporting. And one of the problems with investigative reporting is that it costs money. It costs, when you're not having somebody cranking out. Basically, how it works is you have the general assignment reporters, like in TV. They send them out all day. They hit one spot in the morning, then at noon they go to another spot, or they
like
do
50
another
phone calls.
Yeah, they're running while the investigative reporter gets whatever, it might be a month, it might be 2 months, where all they're doing is working on that. So that costs money, on top of the fact that the investigative reporters are usually your star reporters, so they make a little bit more than some of the other reporters. So it costs money. So what you see is less and less. When I moved back from DC 2011, the TV stations were kicking ass. They had a great, each station had these great investigative reporters. Fox 2 had, Charlie LaDuff and Elric, and then Ross Jones, and all these different, Kevin Dietz and Channel 4. And now a lot of them are gone because a lot of it's money,
Anyway, I was just going to talk to our friends out here, our colleagues. You have 10 more minutes around, a little less than 10 minutes. And I know it's the new year and everybody's been really nice and nobody's saying anything negative about the press. And that just doesn't seem like our viewers. It seems like they have to bring a little more to the table tonight.
Oh, Jim's egging him on. Come on.
No, I'm not egging him on. I think it's a great conversation. I think this is a good opportunity that we don't really have anything scheduled. Adolph didn't make it. Vanessa didn't make it. And if you have something you like to talk about, if there's a case, maybe Allan covered a lot of the drug like the Chambers brothers and some of the other crime in Detroit. Is there anything that anybody wants to ask him, or is there something you want to talk about? What are you going to do with the old police station? Morel Peter. It's a beautiful building. Yeah. I spent my whole career there. I wish they'd have fixed it, but I'm kind of a guy. I like old buildings. It's right on West Jefferson, so I don't know what's going to happen there.
Talking about in Trenton, or
yes, he's talking about Trenton.
I thought you were talking about the Detroit. Okay,
yeah. So anyway, it's I think it may end up being parking for the new police station, which would be disappointing to me. But thankfully, I'm not involved.
Teresa might buy it. I think there was some talk.
And what about the Mr. 1213 wants to? What do you think about the mayor's appointments? We talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the show.
Well, before we got on the air.
Oh, was it before we got on the air?
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's talk about that, Mr. 1213. What do you think, Allan?
You know what? I think there's a lot of very safe choices right now. I think it's smart. I don't think unless you've got people with the experience already. Corporate counsel is going to be the same. Some of the finance people are going to be the same. I think it's smart for the transition, at least, to keep, the police chief's going to be the same. You don't want chaos. And I think the problem is it better if you really do want to, put your prints on there or whatever. I think it's better to be methodical about it, be thoughtful about it, and not create chaos in every department. Because that's the one thing you also, when you're a new leader, you don't want people, as they say, in Vietnam, fragging you, where they're gonna, all come after you as a leader and all be mad at you at the same time. And I saw that with Gannett. They bought the Detroit News, and they didn't want they started giving things to people. People were asking for a trip to Europe. They were like Santa Claus in the beginning because they wanted to win people over before they screwed them over, and they didn't want everyone coming in at once. So I think it's safe the way she's doing it, and I think it's smart to use the people from the Duggan administration if they're competent. If they're not, certainly there's some people you might want to get rid of. But it looks like, like the head of Homeland Security now, they've just appointed the guy who is the deputy director of Homeland Security for the city of Detroit. So I think it's smart.
But I guess my question, Mr. 1213 and Eric Brown, whoever to marry, is it a home run or is it business as usual? I guess maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but I like the opportunity, as we talked about, she knew she was going to be mayor for a while, and she's been thinking about some of these things. I support some of her decisions, but sometimes bringing the dirty laundry from another administration to your administration doesn't always end up well, right?
Well, I'll say this. Look, she's got a new chief of staff, which is her person. She's got her own deputy mayor. So I think she's going to bring a difference there with different. She's not taking on Duggan's chief of staff. She's not taking on the deputy.
She's got her head guy, but she's
surrounded at the top by her people, but the
is
other
she playing
people,
it safe, not risking anything? And that's Tamika's question. Is there some truth to that? She's just,
she's playing
taking
it
the safest and easiest route to at least
I think she's playing it smart. Why the day one are you going to just shake up every department? I think if departments have a problem, I know Teresa doesn't agree with that, but if you see that people have problem, I think it's too early to say business as usual. I really do.
This is not a failed. People will argue that some people may argue. Sorry, don't let me go that far, but that this is a continuation of the previous mayor. This is a successful transition. It's not a failed transition where you need to clean house and
Right.
sweep all those people out the door. So there is certainly that argument that what's going wrong who needs to be replaced, right? Some people, Derrick Henry, it looks like Duggan 2.0. Well, you have to ask yourself this question too, Derrick. Is a part of that part of the agreement? You're going to be the mayor, but some of these people have been loyal to me, the previous mayor, for 8, 10, 20 years. And sometimes there's a deal made. Hey, look, I'm supporting you, but I need Todd Bettison to be the police chief, and I don't need a whole bunch of garbage over it. An outgoing mayor sometimes has that power.
Eric is saying the deputy mayor. No, the deputy mayor was her chief of staff. He was working on her staff. Or the chief of staff has been a former Duggan appointee. But whatever it is. I mean, I think you want to go with people who know how to operate. I don't think
like Dick Cheney.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great idea to just bring in people and say, "Oh, I'm anti-government" and stuff like that. We see disasters from people who bring in people and say, "Oh, they don't know anything about government." There's, Jimmy Carter. I think one of his failings is that he brought in all outsiders, and he was not.
They call him the Georgia Mafia or the Georgia.
Right. And he wasn't an effective president because of that. They didn't know how to operate.
They didn't have any experience in federal.
You have to have both. You want some new vision, but you also want to have people who know where everything is, where the bodies are buried, so to speak, where, you want to know the history. What's the smart way to do it? Change isn't good for change's sake. Can I ask you
about a question? I'm going to ask everybody else to kind of focus on Eric's point. Let me repeat a comment from earlier today. She's the face. He's still the force. And you know what, Eric, I understand where you're coming from, but I think that's kind of disrespectful to the incoming mayor. I think people are selling her short just without any real proof that she's not doing what she wants to do. So saying that he's still the force, I think that's kind of disrespectful to the mayor. I think you're shortchanging her a little bit, in my opinion. I get it, but I get what you're trying to say. But again, she's not taking the Kwame Kilpatrick chief of staff or the Kwame Kilpatrick police or fire chief. She's picking people that have been in a process that's been arguably successful, right, Allan? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. She's keeping the fire chief. She's keeping a lot of the, like I say, I mean, she's keeping the head of corporate counsel for now. I mean, I don't see the harm in why would you put somebody ahead of all these departments who has no clue what they're doing, just for the sake of saying, hey, is it ego? You say, hey, look, I'm making changes right away. Sit down, evaluate, talk to people, figure out who needs to go and who needs to stay. And I just don't think the very first day you want to come in and create chaos.
Thank you, Dwayla, for joining us. G Money Hollywood, Eric Brown, thank you for your comments. Morel Peter, thank you. Tamika, very enlightening tonight. Thank you for your points. Derrick Henry, Mr. 1213, everybody, G Money, of course, always. I want to say thank you. And Alan, I'm good. So
All right, I think we are a wrap. It's exactly 1 hour. Anyways, it's Friday night. We'll be back tomorrow. If you think it's Groundhog Day, that we're be repeating this again tomorrow morning, but we'll have Adolph, who's a spark plug. Hopefully, we'll have Adolph, and we'll certainly have Vanessa Moss, another spark plug on the show. But anyways, thanks,
and Karen. We hope too. Thank you, Karen. Sorry.
And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Happy New Year to everybody, and let's hope for a good 2026, and let's hope good things come for the city of Detroit and our new mayor. We're all rooting for good things to happen. So we'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Good night, everybody.